Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes, you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grandt, and in today's episode, I want to talk about regulation. It's something that I talk about quite often in my in many areas that I discuss because, well, quite frankly, regulation, being regulated, is key to all of us showing up the way that we need to in the world. So there are a couple of different reasons that people can be dysregulated. One of them is sensory differences. But today in this episode, I really want to focus on the impact of trauma and stress on the brain. So when a child or an adult has experienced trauma, has experienced disrupted attachment, disrupted placement, whether a one-time traumatic event or recurring traumatic events. And when I think about our kids, those first 2 years of life are incredibly impactful. But I don't want to lose sight of the separation at birth for kiddos who were adopted, when they were very young, or the even thinking about us as parents, the constant stress that we experience of maybe our child's own behaviors. I remember when things were so challenging with my son, I realized that I was in this high alert state every day while I was at work. So I was showing up to work and I was doing my job, and I think I was doing it very well. But as soon as my phone would ring, I would have this panicked, my whole body would go into this trauma response because of the previous experiences that I had had with calls from the school and the extreme things that I had gotten calls about. And so when I'd get a phone call, no matter who it was, I couldn't focus on anything else that was happening. I was so hyper focused on that phone call and the phone ringing. And oftentimes, as this had happened time and time again, it would take me a longer amount of time each time for me to re-engage in what I was doing at work, for example. It had a huge impact on me, but that was just one small example of the many stressors in my life that led to this high aroused responding state. So we know that when kids or adults, when humans experience, and animals as well, mammals, experience trauma, it has an impact on the brain. It changes the chemistry of the brain, as well as for many, it changes, or as well as for all, right? It changes the neural pathways. I said many, but what I meant to say was, especially for younger kids, it changes the way that the wiring develops in a key time of brain development. The impact of that is that for kids who experience trauma early on, they have um, there's more brain growth in the parts of the brain responsible for that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response, or um, that high arousal response to protect. And there's less brain development in the cortex where we do higher level thinking and problem solving. So, what does that look like for our kids who have experienced trauma? Well, it looks like kids who are um, have behaviors. They might have behaviors towards themselves, towards others, towards things. They might be more destructive, more aggressive, more self-injurious. They also are much more likely to be more emotional and struggle with regulating their own emotions, things like crying and yelling, and what parents will call having a short fuse, or they might also withdraw, pulling away from activities, um, even becoming numb and not responding. What we know is that when our kids are in this high arousal state, we know a couple of things. We know that our kids feel out of control of their own body. They feel dysregulated. They get into trouble more. They feel disappointed. And oftentimes, as our kids get a little bit older, they regret the things that they did because they were out of control. We see all these behaviors, but as we learn more about trauma and understand what's going on in our kids' heads better, we know it comes from a place of dysregulation, a place of our kids being in this high arousal state, even when there's nothing apparent going on around them. I talk with my clients a lot about this, that, my clients will say, well, my child looked perfectly regulated. They looked just fine. They didn't look scared or um, or anxious or angry. They looked even kind of happy, is what I will hear from the parents that I work with. And I remind them that this state of dysregulation, this state of high arousal, is actually the norm for our kids. And we're actually much more likely to see in our kids those varying emotions when there's a bit of calm, when they are a little bit regulated, because that doesn't feel safe to them. Our kids feel safer, and this is true for adults too, who have experienced trauma. Our kids feel safer when they're in a state of chaos often. So when we see all of these things happening with our kids, we see the behaviors, we see the emotions in our kids, and we know that they've had a tricky past, it leads to this state of dysregulation. We know, research tells us that particularly childhood trauma can lead to emotional dysregulation. It can be any type of trauma, whether it's emotional or physical, when our kids have experienced abuse or neglect, disrupted attachment. It is extremely common. This state of dysregulation is extremely common in people who have a post-traumatic stress disorder. And early trauma, especially when it's related to caregivers or trusted loved ones, seems to be one of the more likely reasons for that emotional dysregulation. We know that when their nervous system is dysregulated, they can oftentimes um, check out, like be disengaged or freeze in the moment. It's also likely that we'll see that fawning response from our kids. And if you don't know what fawning is, feel free to reach out and I can explain that further. But when our kids are dysregulated, they're out of their own control. Their body is doing things that their brain doesn't necessarily want to do, but their body's trying to re-regulate itself. So, what does it mean when our kids are regulated? Well, when our kids are regulated, it means that they their emotions are better in control instead of us trying to eliminate their emotions. I think oftentimes when our kids are so angry or so upset, we want to stop those feelings. But as humans, we have been given this wide range of emotions for a reason. We've been given the ability to feel anger and sadness and regret and resent and joy and elation and excitement because it's part of what makes us human. So when we're thinking about our kids and having these big, big emotions, our job isn't to get rid of their emotions or tell them to not be mad. Our job is to help them feel safe in their emotions. Our job is to help them to make safe choices when they're in their emotions, but not to get rid of them. And the other piece to regulation is calming that stress response system. So, helping our kids with self soothing, with flexibility, with having not such a quick from, you know, I'd often hear people say, my kiddo went from 0 to 60, but the truth is they were probably already at 50 if they're a kid who's experienced trauma, right? If their brain is in this high arousal state, being at 0 is not usual for them and may happen only rarely. So, teaching our kids tools to help them not so quickly, so drastically go from 50 to 60, or however you want to look at that, but to have them feel those emotions in a way where they have a little bit more control and they feel a little bit safer with their emotions. When our kids are regulated, they have better impulse control. They are able to build that higher level thinking or that executive functioning. They can handle stress better. It can be more tolerable for them. And when our kids are more regulated, they can also handle delayed gratification, meaning they don't need that instant gratification or instant reward when our kids are more regulated. It's that dysregulated child that impulsively needs the thing right away, which can lead to things like sneaking and stealing, a different topic for a different day. But when our kids are regulated, the point being that they are better able to handle stress, both good and bad stress. So when we think about regulation, I see it that there are really only two key steps to regulation. One is you, and the other is your child. In order for us to help our kids regulate, we must be regulated first in order to help our kids co-regulate. If we are quick to get angry or frustrated or feel out of control when our kids are out of control, how in the world are we going to help them calm themselves when we're struggling to calm ourselves? So, understanding our own unique needs first and implementing tools to regulate ourselves first is key. There are some really important key elements in your human design that can give you really powerful, targeted insight about some key ways to regulate yourself. So, if you're struggling to regulate yourself and you want to better understand your unique energy needs, you know where to contact me. It's all in the notes. I would love to help you with that because quite honestly, we're all different. We all have things that trigger us, some of it from our past conditioning, but a lot of it is just from our energetic makeup, the way that we were created. It's so different for each and every one of us. You can see this happen, right? Whether two siblings who grew up in the same home with the same child rearing experiences can have very different fuses, very different reactions to things. In the same way that two, you and your significant other who weren't raised in the same home could also have very different reactions to the same behavior from your kiddo. We have unique needs. We can't deny that. I'm happy to help you understand yours, but regulating ourselves first really is key. In addition to understanding your unique needs, having practices put in place where you're taking care of yourself on a regular basis is essential. Like I said, there's some nuances depending on your energetic type, but all of us have to have a full, if not overflowing cup in order to show up the way that we want to for our kids. I hear from so many parents that I don't have time to take care of myself, or um, I've had so many parents respond as if it's a joke, like, "Are you kidding me? Take care of me? There's no way I could do that." But when we go into parenting with that mindset that I must take care of the kids first before I take care of myself, you will be in a perpetual state of depletion. You will be trying to drive your car uphill with no gas in the tank or no battery charge, whatever kind of car is your jam. But you'll be fighting a battle that you're not likely to win because we we as humans need to have the energy, the compassion, the capacity to take care of others. I there's some parents that I've been talking with recently in a group that they feel very strongly that it is their duty to take care of others first, to not ask for help. And I can't change the way that you think, but it seems when we say those words, like, I must take care of others first, I can't ask for help, it's not my responsibility to pass it on to others. When we take that stance, although it seems like we're being so selfless, we are, in fact, maybe looking at that in a way that is impacting our ability to really show up in the way that we think we are or the way that we want to. Because when we're being a martyr and thinking that we're the only ones that can do it, that we are the only ones that can hold up all of these plates, we can't possibly give all of ourselves to those that we love most. We can't possibly show up in the way that we want to. Again, when our cup is half empty or bone dry, and we can't possibly show up in the way that we know we need to for our kids who need us the most if we're not doing the necessary work to take care of ourselves. So I won't be on that soapbox anymore, but we must take care of ourselves before we can help our kids with those key tools to help calm our child. So like I said, there are two relatively simple elements to regulation. One is you, and the other is our child. And what trauma research tells us is that there are some things that have been proven to be effective in supporting, re-regulating our kids. It works for all ages, but here we're talking about parenting. Well, one of those key elements is actually movement, and in particular, repetitive movement. So rocking or swaying or dancing or tapping, things like that. Movement, and especially in a repetitive manner, has been shown to be extremely powerful in helping to re-regulate the brain. So back to the example about the kiddo on the playground who pushes the other kids, and their consequence is to lose recess. They have to stay inside. Or, our kids often who struggle with regulation, struggle with that executive functioning, often struggle in school And we know when our kids get into those higher grades, if they're not doing well in their schoolwork, they're pulled out of sports. My goodness, if there's anything that we know about trauma, movement is key to helping our kids to re-regulate. And so pulling our kids out of sports, pulling them out of recess or gym class or other places where they have a productive outlet to engage in movement might not be the most effective way to respond to our child's needs. Some other things to consider when we're thinking about re-regulating our kids, and again, a lot of this is trial and error. There's no cookie cut strategy because your child did not come from a cookie cutter. And there are some key elements in your child's design that can give you some really, their human design, that can give you some powerful insight about some things that might be more regulating for them as opposed to other kids too. But in general, movement is key. Also, doing things that provide proprioceptive input or vestibular input. So, those are things, proprioceptive involves our muscles and our joints, vestibular involves movement. So, when I think about these two types of input, letting kids play on the swing or jump on a trampoline or dance to music, things like that can be, for many kids, very powerful. Also, engaging our other kids' senses can prove to be very regulating. There is a direct path from our sense of smell to the brain in a way that is different than our other senses. And so sometimes for some of our kids, there might be key smells that help to re-regulate our kids that are calming for them. I would, however, encourage you to be mindful about artificial versus natural smells, that artificial smells can be triggering for our kids. So just something to be mindful if you're, for example, wanting to explore with lavender, I would suggest looking at a natural lavender scent as opposed to an artificial one. Uh, also, there's also a lot of research about the involvement of the mouth in many different ways when it comes to regulating. So, a couple of things. One is about taste. There is some research to show some strong links between the taste of sweet and connection. And when we think about our kids who are dysregulated, connection is key. Helping our kids to connect with you can be very regulating. So, having a bowl of ice cream or whatever your kiddo's jam is to engage their sense, their taste of sweet along with connection can be really, really powerful in regulating as well. Also engaging in some fine motor activities, so things like stringing beads or coloring or playing with stickers. Sometimes those things can be very regulating for kids as well. And then the last idea is just being really mindful about the environment and the routines that are happening. So, especially for our kids who have a tricky past, who live in that high state of arousal, when things are out of routine, that can be really unsettling. So thinking about ways, life is full of upheavals in our routine. So I'm not suggesting that you don't change the routine, but what I am suggesting is to be mindful of that and perhaps incorporate some of the other things that I just rattled off that are regulating as you make changes to the routine. Are there things that you can do to incorporate movement into routine changes or the sense of smell or some sweet snacks? And of course, follow your doctor's recommendations when it comes to dietary restrictions. However, be, you know, be curious and explore ways to help your kiddo regulate. And then the last piece, like I said, about environment, look around at what is happening in the environment that your child is in. Is it too loud? Is it too chaotic? Are has daylight changed where you're at? Is that perhaps dysregulating? Are you moving from one environment to another many times throughout the day? What is it about the environment that might be causing an increased state of arousal for your kiddo that you could have an impact on. So just a few ideas to help regulate your kiddo, regulate yourself so that you can show up the way that you want to for your kiddo so that you can help them re-regulate and engage in life with you. Because I know you have so much that you want to teach your child, so much you want to help them learn. But when they're dysregulated, your words have so much less meaning than they will when your child is regulated. When your child is calm and regulated, then you have so much power to teach them and grow with them and learn from them in a way that it's just really, really hard to do when our kids are dysregulated. So I hope that you found this episode helpful with ways to understand your kids' regulation, but then also how to respond to it. And when you're ready for change in your family, check out the show notes with ways to connect. Take care and I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally and show you that you have that power within you.